Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Check it out. Do-do-do, Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Brought to you by Library Love Fest.
We're back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our Library Love Fest Galley Club. I'm Virginia.
Hi, I'm Lainey. Good to be with you all.
Hey everyone, I'm Essie. It's fun to be here.
So, as most of you know, this is the third episode in the first title selection for our Galley Club. And we just, we talked to you about having a Galley Club, which is basically a book club. It's before pub, so it's a Galley Club. And we announced the book in the first week. We have folks on to talk about the book who've worked on the book in the second week. And then the third week, we have the author on. And by then, hopefully you've read the book and have questions and comments. So this is the third episode, and we're going to have a great conversation with the author of our celebrated book. So without further ado, let's show the first slide of the jacket of this beautiful book, Remarkably Bright Creatures. This is a debut novel by Shelby Van Pelt. It goes on sale in May, and we are thrilled to have her with us today. So Shelby Van Pelt, why don't you come on screen? Hello.
Hi. It's wonderful to be here.
It's great to have you here. We're so excited to talk to you, and we know that so many librarians have been itching to talk to you about this book. There's so much to discuss, and so thanks so much and congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It's been a wild ride the last year or so.
I bet your life has really. I can't wait to talk to you about, how this has kind of changed your life and what the experience has been for you. But so we will ask our own questions, and we'll ask the questions that show up in the chat room. But as I said, this is the third episode. So last week we spoke with the associate publisher and publisher Helen Atzma, publisher of Echo, and Miriam Parker, associate publisher, and they just brought this cornucopia of information about this beautiful book and how it was discovered and how everybody got so excited about it and what went into it. We talked about the content, we talked about the book jacket, we talked about the audio. So there was a great discussion in there. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, we put a link in our chat room, and that's to the YouTube video. Library Love Fest has a YouTube channel, so you can check it out there, and it's really, really cool stuff. Great info. So because we are speaking now with the author, just letting you know, as we said, spoiler alerts, we are going to be talking about this book from cover to cover. So if you haven't read the book yet, why? And if you don't want to have things spoiled, log off, read the book, and then watch the replay of this later, because it's so good. And I envy anybody who gets to read this for the first time, because it's really such a very different book. And it just ticks all the boxes, but in the most authentic way. And so anyway, that's what's going to happen today. So Shelby, now that the housekeeping is out of the way, ask Elaine if I've forgotten anything, which I probably have, let me know. So before we get started, can we just pull up the quotes again? These two quotes I love so much by Kevin Wilson and Cynthia D'Apri-Sweeney. They're both raves. And if you've read the book, which, as I say, by now I hope that you have, I think this quote by Kevin Wilson says so much about what this book is. There are multiple layers to this book about heart, family, and friendships, and getting older. And I just find this quote so beautiful. And as you know, Kevin Wilson is a big favorite with us, and Nothing to See Here is one of his most delicious books. And the other quote by Cynthia D'Apri-Sweeney is equally hard-hitting, and just says it's a book that manages to be wry and wise, charming and surprising, and features the most intriguing and satisfying characters I've encountered in fiction in a very long time. Marcellus the Octopus. So Shelby, do you want to talk a little bit about what got you started in this? What gave you the idea for this?
Sure. I mean, I get that question a lot. People want to know how I came to write a book about an octopus. I'm not a marine biologist or, even an octopus expert of any kind, but started really with an internet video, as many things do in our world. I was watching this video from the Seattle Aquarium. This was probably about 2015 or so. So this was a little ways back. And there was this octopus that was making a break for it, trying to get out of its enclosure. And I just couldn't let go of the idea that there was, that's a character right there. There is a character inside that octopus. And then, of course, I fell down the rabbit hole of looking at videos of other octopuses escaping, because this happens with some frequency, escaping their enclosures, going out and going over to the fish bucket to take a chunk of fish, solving puzzles, opening boxes, undoing locks. I mean, it's just, there's so much fascinating. It's a really great rabbit hole to go down if you've got an afternoon to waste. So I became fascinated. And then sometime later, I was taking a writing workshop. I had just moved to Atlanta, and I had never written any kind of fiction before. And I didn't really know anyone in Atlanta. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to sign up for this writing course. It was at Emory University in their continuing education program. They had this evening, learn how to write a novel type course. And so I took that class. And one of the first things we did in that class was a prompted writing exercise where the instructor asked us to try to write from a unexpected point of view. And my mind went right to that octopus getting out of its tank. And really the little blurb that I wrote on a piece of paper in that class is what became the first opening pages of this novel so many years later.
And we have, do you want to talk about the video to the news piece that we have? We have the little slide, and then we have the little news clip.
Yeah, if you guys want to pull up the octopus slide. I mean, it's just, can you blame him? I remember reading later that he was kind of a young upstart, a little bit of a troublemaker. And, this happened just during the day when there's, I think, a field trip full of kids there watching this. Just can't imagine what must have gone through everyone's minds watching this very determined creature make this kind of slow motion break for freedom. I think this one's name is Ink or Inky, so he's not Marcellus, but that's the germ of Marcellus right there.
So cool. And we have the video in the chat room, so watch it later, because we were watching it before, and of course, because technology, it's a little staggered, but it kind of takes away from what you actually see when you watch the video, which is like, I think Shelby, I think you said it was like 50 seconds or something, but it's so cool to see this octopus trying to get out of this thing. So you can watch that later in the chat room, but that's pretty neat. So we'll just start with some questions here, because I want to make sure we get to everybody's questions. But you know what? This is a loose conversation. This is going to be, us asking questions, but more importantly, the people who have read the book have questions, and that's why we're doing this. So we'll get right to them, and then we'll pepper in our own throughout. So many people here are just happy to be here. And they are from, I don't know, Philadelphia and Connecticut and Omaha. So let's see. What's our first question? Kimberly McGee says she loves this book so much, the quirky characters and the unusual setting, not to mention our beloved Marcellus. Yes. Amy White wants to know, how did you pick an octopus as a character?
Well, octopuses are clearly one of the smartest animals out there. And, I knew that this voice for a character was going to be what it was going to be when I first started writing it. You know, and on a side note, I don't know if any of you have listened to the teaser from the audiobook, but Michael Urie reading Marcellus is just beyond perfect. I mean, when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is the voice that was in my head when I was writing this. I mean, it's just absolutely uncanny. So I kind of, that voice came to me, and in some ways, I don't know what other kind of creature it could be besides an octopus. I mean, it's just, Marcellus is so convinced at the beginning and throughout of his superiority and his, you know, position in the pecking order, and how he's sort of this injustice of having to be cared for by these humans who are so inferior to him. You know, I could have been a lot of other animals, I suppose. I've always been kind of an animal lover. We have cats in my house. You can see one of them running through in the background. I was kind of a weird kid with animals. You could pull up the animal slide. I was the weird kid with a bedroom full of lizards. So I have always kind of liked creatures that are maybe not so traditionally snuggly. And, you know, I probably have given them voices in my head throughout my whole life. but yeah, Marcellus just came to me really naturally as an octopus, and I don't know what else he could be. It was just a very natural fit in my mind.
Yeah, I love hearing him. I love when he's talking about like all of the dull creatures around him. He's like, I can keep secrets, but like, what options do I have? No one else can go up to my level. And I just love that. I love that he's, you know, personified and has these thoughts. And so, yeah, Michael Urie was great, because you're just like, you get that, like, I am better than you feel from this voice and this reading. I love it. I love it. We have a question from Vicky Nesting. So we had talked about, I know we were going to talk a little bit more about all of the things, including like elder care, but having an older character as main character. Vicky says, you were so young, Shelby. How did you so effectively channel the thoughts and concerns of Tova, 70-year-old woman?
I don't know. I think maybe sometimes in my mind, I'm a 70-year-old woman, and I have been for a while. The character of Tova was really heavily influenced by my grandmother, who passed away a few years ago. Shared a lot of Tova's same characteristics. Her family came from Sweden. She was this little old lady who was just incredibly strong and busy and spry. And she was very, very kind and warm. And also at the same time, kind of had a shell around her. You know, everything was always okay. Yeah, here she is. Yes, my grandma Anna, and me in 1983 in her kitchen. I think that's her coffee pot there in the foreground, the silver thing, which, I mean, this woman drank more coffee than anyone I've ever met in my life. And she was just always busy. Like, you know, like Tova, that's what she did. She just kept busy, hardly ever sat down. I mean, if she was sitting down, it was to do a crossword puzzle or crochet an Afghan. I think we have about 20 Afghans in my house that were the product of her very prolific crocheting. But that keeping busyness was really something that struck me in an older character. And, you know, Tova's life events are completely fictional. She doesn't share any of that with my grandmother. But the idea of keeping busy as a way of processing grief, in some ways holding grief in, not letting yourself be still enough to ever have to address it. And that, you know, it's very much what Tova is doing at the beginning of this book, and the thing that she has to, you know, learn to open up and to share that with other people and other animals, other aquatic animals. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of the details in the book about Tova came from my grandmother's life. She really did have a Knitwits knitting lunch club.
That's great.
That she met with. They were all really sweet ladies. I'm not sure if any of them are still with us, but probably some of their children I'm sure are. And it would be so amazing to me if they recognized that in the book as just a, you know, a nice little homage to that wonderful group.
Yeah, that's lovely. There and yeah, you we talk about all of the different things that you touch on in this book but there are so many people, myself included, who can relate to people getting older and not knowing what their future holds, and so what do, decisions that you have to make, and about your your home, your belongings, and where do you go, and who's going to take care of you. I mean, there's so much in this book that is relatable, and the fact that there you go, I love this slide so much. Shelby had put together this great presentation in these slides, and this one to me, it just speaks to everything, because it really is, you've got your surly cephalopod narrator, and he's so great, and he is so kind of snotty, because he does think who he is. He's a pretty smart fella, and he wants you to know it. But there's also grief and loss and unlikely friendships and friendships late in life, which I think is kind of cool. And so elder care issues, and just there's so much to this book, and this is why we chose this book, because we all just sort of fell in love with it. Yes, on the one level, there's this woman who is kind of filling up her time by not volunteering, she gets her stubs, but she also at the aquarium, but she's connecting on a completely different level with the animals there, and specifically with the octopus. It's beautiful. A really beautiful story. Essie, you have a question, right?
Yes, I have one from Kim McGee. She did say, are all of your characters based on your grandmother's experiences at the aquarium, or are they a nod to people who have been part of your life?
Well, Tova is pretty clearly based on my grandmother. I think the rest of the characters, there was no Ethan. I made that up. He I don't know where the idea of like a kind of boisterous Scottish shopkeeper came into my head, but it came to me, and I was like, I think this guy's going to be in the book, and I'm gonna give him and Tova a little something to chew on. Cameron, the other POV character, I get a lot of questions about him, and I think the thing that I wanted to do with Cameron, he's another main character, but he's also a little bit of the antagonist in this book. I feel like we've all known a Cameron in our lives, and he's a little bit difficult to get on board with, because he is just such a, he keeps sabotaging himself.
Mhm.
He can't get it together. It's like, you're 30 years old, man. Why can't you get it together? But I think, I guess I've known people like that, and I guess maybe I see some shades of a younger version of myself in what I wrote about him. Not as extreme and not with the same backstory, but just this, when you're kind of a young adult and you're trying to figure out how to adult, and sometimes, things like paying the bills or checking your bank account balance or checking your credit score is a little bit scary. So you just shove it off and make a joke and pretend it doesn't exist. I think that's relatable to a lot of people. So that's kind of where I was coming from with Cameron, rather than a specific person, more just an amalgamation of traits that we see in ourselves, in people that we care about, who sometimes frustrate us because they refuse to do what they need to do. And then I wanted to give him the chance to grow a little bit and to have what he never had to begin with, which was, a real family.
Yeah, he does seem to be pretty angry, understandably so, but he does sabotage himself. God.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Let's see. Jennifer says, how did you give Marcellus his great personality as a perpetual sire? I love his sardonic, long-suffering tone. Jennifer.
Yeah, it just really came to me when I was writing it. One of the things when I was trying to figure out how to frame this book, and set it up structurally, I spent a lot of time at aquariums just looking at octopuses. I think we have a slide with some of those aquariums, and then with the particular aquarium. Yeah, so I was living in Georgia when this whole thing started, and so spent a lot of time at the Georgia Aquarium, which is a fantastic aquarium, just looking at the octopuses. My daughter is there I went and bought a membership, and the membership worker or volunteer who was processing the transaction, oh, your daughter's gonna love this so much. It's, I'm like, this is not for her, this is for me, because I'm gonna put her in the stroller, make her take a nap, and then stand here and stare at the octopus. Yeah, and this is the aquarium that was actually in my hometown, which the aquarium in the book is based on, which was also a really special place to me. I spent a lot of time there in the 1980s. But I think in looking at octopuses, they have, and this comes up a lot in the book, is their eyes. There is something, their eyes are different than other animals. And, again, I'm not a biologist, but it just, they see you back when you see them. And so I think it was easier for me to give him that kind of voice, having spent this time just in staring contests with octopuses. When they would come out, they don't always, there's a lot of wasted time waiting for them to come out. But yeah, just seeing how they see you back and wondering what they might be thinking. And it just very naturally came to me that this very sarcastic, curmudgeonly voice is what would accompany that look.
And how he would respond to people when he couldn't respond, like physically, he can't tell what his thoughts are. So he really does have to be kind of a mastermind behind a lot of the scenes, which is great. Yeah.
And I love his observations of people that come to look at him in the tank and what he's really thinking.
Well, it's, if he's so smart and he's so bored.
Yeah.
And I think Marcellus would tell you, oh, Cubans, I have no use for them. But that's actually not true, right? He's a little bit of a soap opera watcher. He's a little bit into it,
right.
Watching people and observing them. And I think he prides himself a little bit on those observations, even if he wouldn't admit that.
Right. Okay, we have a question from Mary Hoff Robinson. Loved both readers on the audio from NetGalley. Were you involved in picking the readers?
Yeah, I think that the standard procedure is they give you like a list, and you're supposed to listen to them and rank them. And we did do that, but before we even got the list, the wonderful people in the audiobook division were like, look, we have these two narrators that we think would be perfect. What do you think? And I listened to them like, oh, they're perfect. And my agent was like, no, let's do the list. We're supposed to do the lists. Let's do the list. So we did the list. And it was a great list. I think there would have been a lot of solid options, but I think their instincts were right on that, those were just the perfect voices for the book. And if we could be lucky enough to get them, let's go get them. And we were, and I'm so thrilled. I'm not honestly really a huge audiobook person myself. I listen to them sometimes, but it's not my main way of listening to books. And, I think this audiobook will make fans out of people who are not audiobook people. It's really good.
Yeah, I agree. I know, Essie, you said you listened to the audio, right, Essie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. And you're right when you say this is something that is going to make fans out of people who usually aren't fans of audiobooks. That was probably the biggest thing that people commented on when we dropped the audio sample. It was just, that's what made them inspired to even try it to begin with. And now they like it. So that was the first audiobook for many. And it was the one that made them change their minds.
Yes. And Jennifer Winberry has just chimed in and said the same thing. She's not an audiobook person. And that was the first audiobook she listened to in its entirety. And it was Marcellus's voice that got me. And that was Michael Urie. Excuse me. And I loved it. We put the link in there, the clip, and we'll put the clip in again into the chat room so you can take a listen. And if you've never listened before, just give it a shot because it's really something. Elena, you've got a question?
Yeah, and just a reminder, the ALC, the whole audiobook is up on Edelweiss and NetGalley, so you can listen now if you haven't already. If you read the book, get the audiobook, try it. So Maureen Roberts, this is your debut novel. What was the publication process? or sorry, what has the publication process been like for you, and any surprises? I'm sure that's a leading question.
I mean, it's been a huge learning experience, a fascinating one. I think, these are sometimes things that I don't say too loudly around other writers, because I have been so incredibly lucky on this journey and blessed with a relatively, I don't want to say easy, but I queried the book, and then I got an agent and we sold the book, and it's literally a dream come true from so many different angles. I feel endlessly lucky to be sitting here today in this position. It's unreal. But surprises, I think how many people are involved in the process from start to finish. I mean, I think people always say, or sometimes surprised at how long it takes a book to become a book after it's maybe put under contract or something. And I even had a lot of those reactions from, my writer friends and non-writer friends, like, oh yeah, I sold my book. It's coming out, a year from now. And people are like, a year, what does it take them a year to do? And I didn't really have a good answer for that at first, but I feel like I do have a really good answer for it now. It's been a busy year. The number of people that, are involved, and departments that are involved, all working together to bring it together and make the product perfect, make the cover perfect, the audio actors, the copy, the cover, I mean, just all of it. It's a huge hands-on project, and I'm very, very grateful to every single person who has been part of that along the way. It's been a great team.
Joe Jones is asking a question that I thought about myself. He said, I like how you used the title in the beginning of the book about how on the plaque it said octopuses are remarkably bright creatures. And then at the end, when Marcellus said humans can occasionally be remarkably bright creatures. Did you plan that all along? Same question, Joe.
I would love to say that I planned that all along, but I did not. When I was first toying around with the idea of this book and writing that first section, I didn't know what the title would be. I wrote parts of that beginning part many years ago, and it worked on it on and off for many years. I had a couple of kids, life got busy. And then it was really in 2020, in like January of 2020, which, was like the month before the world ended, where I sat down and said, hey, I'm going to write this book this year, like beyond, these first couple chapters that I have been just tinkering with on and off for years. But it didn't have a title at that point. Remarkably bright creatures actually did not exist until I had written through the full draft and had it sitting in this file on my computer called Marcellus. I'm like, the book can't be called Marcellus. I've got to come up with a better name. So I think I spent a whole day doing this naming exercise that one of my writing group people had turned me on to, and came about Remarkably Bright Creatures. It was something that people said, in reading articles about octopuses, not exactly remarkably bright creatures, but some combination of remarkable creatures, incredibly bright. And I just kind of put those together, and I said, you know what, like, that's the perfect title. That would be on the plaque at his enclosure for sure. That's exactly the kind of language that they would use. And he had, I can't remember what the exact language was, but in that scene at the end, Marcellus had said something like that, a similar sentiment, but I just lined it up so that it matched the language exactly. And I was really happy when I did that. It's one of those writer things where you do it and you're like, oh, it's going to look like I planned this all along, but it's your dirty little secret that actually it was just kind of kismet.
Yeah, I'm curious, when you were looking at plaques in your own kind of research, watching did the plaques kind of nod to how smart they were, or was it more like scientific stuff?
They're more scientific.
Yeah.
in real life. I took some liberties with that to make it on. I think sometimes a little plaque might just say their Latin name and their diet and where they're from. I've also been to some aquariums that will have a bigger kind of like poster size thing next to it that would have maybe more of like a paragraph that you'd find in an encyclopedia or something. And this is kind of a hybrid of those.
Yeah, I think they should have more of those. I was just curious as to like if people were looking at them and reading, would they know, necessarily how smart they are, but that's interesting.
Essie, you've got a question from Sylvia?
Yeah, I loved how you had this saved for the longest time as Marcellus, because that is just such a writer thing to do. I think we don't even know like what the end product is gonna be. We just know our characters and like the story and where we want to go, I guess. But for the most part, it's really stream of conscious for a lot of people. So this question kind of makes me laugh. From Sylvia. Do your characters work their way into your dreams during the writing process?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm more of a pantser type, if y'all are familiar with the plotter versus pantser. So, I did a lot of rewriting when it came to writing this, because I didn't really have the plot planned out in detail when I started, but I had the characters. And they live rent free in your head when you're in the middle of a project like this, whether you're awake or asleep. Yeah.
But that's the fun part, because then you'll go through your day and you'll overhear something or see something and you're like, Marcellus would do that, or he would say that or something. And then you just kind of store it away until you could use it.
Yeah. The most interesting thing to me, I think, just on more of a personal level, has been learning how much I am like Tova in some ways. I got to the end of this, and then, she's obviously in a different stage of life than I am, but, especially going through COVID and in the pandemic and some of the more stressful periods of our lives, I will say I do not clean for fun. That is not my stress release. But, some of her more, her tendency to just insist that everything is okay, to be reluctant to open up to people. I'm like, gosh, I think I probably inherited some of that. And, it's always really gratifying as a writer when, your fictional character's journey of self-discovery can kind of help you go on your own little journey of self-discovery. So that was really a nice side effect.
That's so true. Well said.
Love that. Okay, so Casey Davis said, I have always loved books about animals, and so few of them are from the animal's point of view. Charlotte's Web, Racing in the Rain, Hollow Kingdom. And how did you prepare to embrace the thoughts and feelings and personality of Marcellus?
Well, I agree. I also love books that are written by animals. And Charlotte's Web, I think we're on our we've read it 4 times, my kids and I. And thankfully they love it too, because it's one of my favorites to read aloud to them. I think in writing an animal character, I first knew I wanted to be really careful, because I think anytime we give an animal human thoughts and feelings, it's a delicate line to walk. You want to do right by the animal and not kind of overdo it, not kind of bring it into a cheesy territory or, too unbelievable. And one of the big things that I grappled with in writing an animal character was, could he talk? Could he communicate? Like, where is that line, right? And I knew that a talking octopus, he couldn't talk to people. I grappled a lot with whether he could talk to the other exhibits in the aquarium. And I actually had a scene later in the book that my agent thankfully made me cut before we put it out on submission, where I had let someone talk back to him. And she was just like, no, it's a bridge too far. Marcellus can do this. He can have this journal that's not really talking, but it's just communicating. But you got to draw the line at them being able to have a conversation back and forth. And so I think, in anyone who's writing from a non-human point of view, it's just, you have to decide, it's world building, really, I guess. You have to decide what those rules are, where the line is, what is the reader going to accept, and what is going to kind of make them roll their eyes or be too much, or just, be so outlandish that it kind of takes you out of the scene. And, I've heard that from a lot of people who've read advanced copies, that they're like, it's an octopus, I don't know. And then they read it and they're like, okay, yeah, it's an octopus, but I can roll with it. And so I hope I've hit the right balance there. It seems like for some people I have, so I'm grateful for that.
Well, I'll say for us, you have, and for so many people who've already read it. I mean, we have a lot of librarians who are listening and posting questions, and they're your ultimate reader. And I never felt taken out of there. I never thought like, this is silly. Never. So I think that you took such care and respect, frankly, with, just how far to take this to where it works, and again, he's connecting, and the scenes where he wraps his tentacle around her, where he's holding her, and I just think it's just so beautiful, and I don't know, I just love this book. It's wonderful. I'm trying to find the
I got a lot of that from Cy Montgomery's book, Soul of an Octopus, which is it's a fantastic nonfiction book. If you like octopuses and you haven't read it, like, put it on your list, because it's wonderful. And she describes that in detail, that experience of having the arm, curl around her arm, and how that felt, and a very intimate feeling.
Right.
Very vulnerable feeling, and I wanted to capture that with Tova. Let her feel vulnerable, because
Right.
she doesn't let herself be vulnerable very often.
Yeah, and at the end she really does let that guard down completely, and it's so touching. I did want to touch on that for a second before we continue with the questions, just about your research. And I know that The Soul of an Octopus was a book that you relied heavily on, in addition to all of your research, so I'm glad that you brought that up. At the end of the book, in your acknowledgments, you acknowledge many people with gratitude extended to Maria Heater, I hope that's how you say her name, with the Nelson Literary Agency, who reviewed your query letter, realized there was an octopus narrator, and wrote in the margin, "This is either brilliant or bananas." I love that.
Yeah, and it's kind of both, right? I mean, I hope.
I guess, although I don't think of it as bananas, I just think of it as this beautiful story. But I give you so much credit for throwing that out there, handling it the way you did, and what the response is saying everything. So hats off. So Carol and Tack says, "Oh my gosh, Ethan, she loves Ethan because he's so funny." And I love him too. I love him. I don't know where you came up with him, and you said yourself, like, where does this Scottish crazy man go? But I love him. He's drinking Lefroy, and he's bananas, and I love him. Janet Lockhart says, "The chapters with Marcellus are the only ones told in the first person. Was this decision made from the start of writing the novel, or did it evolve over time?"
That was made from the start. Yeah, I don't know that it was necessarily a conscious decision of, I'm going to write these in the first person and these in the third person, more as that's just kind of how it came out when I started writing it. I wanted the Marcellus chapters to, obviously to feel very different, to reflect, his sort of distance from the other characters, across a species line there. And also they're supposed to have kind of a journal entry quality to them. We're not really clear I think one of the reasons the audiobook might resonate so well is because in my head, that's kind of what it is. It's like this diary, and it's a voiceover. It's a narrator speaking from this other point of view. And so it felt very natural to have him be in the first person. He's also is the only one that he's in the present tense, but he has some sections where he's much more talking about what has happened to him in the past versus being in present tense, what is happening right now, like the rest of the characters. So yeah, that was definitely an intentional choice, and one that was from the beginning to have them be very different styles.
Yeah. There's a question from Susan Riley. Have you ever considered writing a book using the POV of another type of animal, like a dog? There are lots of books through the eyes of a dog, but you have such a unique talent, and I'd love to see more.
Oh, that's funny. I've written a number of short stories that actually are from other animal perspectives. It is pretty fun. I'm a total cat person and cat lover. And I think it would be pretty fun to write from a cat's point of view. And cats in some ways are a little bit similar to octopuses. They don't
was
have
just
quite
thinking
the high degree of intelligence that octopuses are thought to have. But there's something about, like I look at my cat and I'm like, oh, come here, Luda, come here. And the way that he just looks at me like, what are you on? There's no way. Like, I hear you. I understand. But no. Why would I do that? It's beneath me.
Yeah. I feel like get Michael Yuri back for the cat. Just
Yeah.
why are you over here?
It's funny. Okay, we have so many more questions, so we're just going to keep on going. Casey Davis says, so much goes behind the scenes at zoos and aquariums. Did you receive detail from the caretakers and employees' point of view?
I reached out and asked people who are in marine biology to help me read Marcellus's sections in particular and make sure that some of those details, well, all of those details, if they weren't completely 100% how it's done, that it is at least as believable, within the realm of, okay, this is how it could be done. I've never worked at an aquarium. Like I said, I'm kind of an armchair octopus person, looking at it mostly from the outside in. Cy Montgomery's book also does have a lot of great detail on the inner workings of aquariums. The Alaska Sea Life Center was great. They actually are, they do a lot of rescue work with the type of octopus that Marcellus is. So they were a great resource. And then, I have to mention the Point Defiant Zoo and Aquarium. They weren't so much a resource as just an inspiration for me. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and just like I said, I spent so much time there as a kid, and the building that their aquarium used to be housed in, they since have built a new one. I think in maybe 2017, they built a brand new facility, but the old one that I remember visiting as a kid was just this round cement building. It was dark, it was a little smelly, it wasn't really like nice. I mean, I loved it, but it was kind of imperfect. And, so when I wrote my aquarium, I very much modeled it after that. And it had that same setup where there was a big tank in the middle, and then all the tanks around on the outside, where you would access, if you wanted to get in behind those tanks, there was sort of a series of doors in the hallway that you could go in and get into the behind the tank area. And so that was the setup that I based the Soul Bay Aquarium on.
Gotcha.
That is awesome. There's another question here by Amy White. Did you get input on Tova's look on the cover? Is it a head covering or gray hair?
Oh, that's interesting. It's gray hair in my mind, but it could be a head covering, I suppose. Yeah, I liked the way that the cover was done, where you're not really seeing her face, you just see a little sliver of her profile, and I felt that was really true to her character. That she's just you have to work to get to know the real Tova. So I really liked how they did that on the cover.
It's interesting. I think, Lainey, you have a question from Lillian?
Yeah, it's about there have some shelf envy of all the books behind you.
Oh.
So Lillian Dabney asked, I see Homer on your shelf. Did that book have any influence on your story, philosophically or narratively?
Interesting. I wouldn't say so much specifically on this book. I actually bought that and reread it when I was thinking about working on another project that was wanting to mirror like a hero's journey type of thing, but it's a great book. I think the one that influenced this book more would be Marcus Aurelius, which actually, interestingly, I'm not sure I've ever told this story to anyone before, but that was originally what I wanted to name Marcellus, was Marcus Aurelius, because of his very stoic nature and his, his focus on, he's coming down to his death. And I had bought that book and reread it when I was in the early stages of doing that, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which I think I originally first read in college. I was a partial philosophy major in college. I remember reading it then. But I was told by many people that Marcus Aurelius was not a good name for an octopus. Some of my early critique partners and beta readers, it was just a mouthful. People, it's bringing the book to kind of a level of inaccessibility that might not really be that, people might be turned off by it or whatever. So that Marcellus really is sort of in addition to having the us, which just kind of goes with octopus. It was really kind of a mashup of Marcus Aurelius.
That's really cool. That's a very interesting piece of info there. I like that.
Yeah, and great for the book clubs after ours because they can kind of read in tandem and talk about it. Yeah.
That's right. Let's see, more questions. We have comments. John Holmes says, proud of you, Shelby Van Pelt.
Oh, this is my family now.
Oh, cool.
Thank you, John.
Dana Short says, go Shelby. So excited for you.
Oh,
So
I've got my cheering crew.
Good.
I'm very lucky.
Essie, Laney, you want to pull some more questions from the room?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will point out this book is all about family and found family and people cheering you on. So it all kind of works out well. Let's see. Vicky Nesting, such an impressive debut. Can you tell us anything about what you're working on next?
Sure. I think sophomore novels, I've always heard, are notoriously, can be often an author's most challenging project of their career. And I'm finding it a little bit challenging and trying not to stress too much about, giving myself a strict deadline of getting something done, but I am trying to keep plugging away on it. It's not a sequel. It does take place in the same sort of world. And it does also include a narrator that is a little unexpected / mysterious. And mostly I just want to make sure that I'm kind of, keeping the same vibe, some of the same themes. It's very much a novel about a main character who's very stuck it's a male main character this time, very stuck in where he is in his life. And I don't want to say depressed, but just doesn't know how to take the next step to get out of his rut. And then, comes upon something that will inspire him to do that. So a similar theme really to Remarkably Bright Creatures, but there's no octopus, unfortunately, because I know everyone wants to know that, at least not as a central character. It's a little bit of a shame that Marcellus was near the end of his life, but I think I would love to write him again sometime, maybe in a short story. I've played around with that a little bit, like his early life in the ocean before he was captured. I've played around with that a little bit. I might make a short story someday.
I love that. Yeah. Or even like in conversation with other octopuses. That'd be fun. See how they interact.
Essie?
That would be cool. There's a question here from Casey Davis, which is great. Any chance for a children's companion book?
I've thought about that. That's an interesting idea. My kids would love that. They know that mommy wrote a book about an octopus, and it would be cool to write something that was maybe more, I don't know if it would be a picture book or more of an early reader type thing, but it's a cool idea.
Susan Riley wants to know, have you ever touched a real octopus? How do you know what it feels like?
I don't. I have not. It must have been probably about 2 years ago. It was that early 2020 time. And I had written to the Shed Aquarium. I live now in the suburbs of Chicago. I had written to the Shed Aquarium to see if I could go do one of they didn't offer an octopus encounter, but they offered other types of animal encounters, and I had written to them to see if I could make my own encounter and do it with their octopus. And I don't know if they ever wrote me back, because I think the week that I hit send on that was like the week that the world shut down.
Oh,
And so I just cranked forward on it without the benefit of that. But it's on my bucket list, absolutely.
yeah, I bet that it is. There are so many comments here about just for the love for the book. Vicky Nesting says, as a Scandinavian American, I too recognize many of Tova's characteristics. And people are just talking about, like, it's when Jennifer Winbury says, when Marcellus found Tova's key, it got goosebumps. I mean, people are talking about that wonderful relationship, and how that may have been the first time that she had been, emotionally touched in quite some time. She really does seem so closed up. That's Nicole Barry Williams says, Marcellus is the first to actually see and touch Tova in a long time. You agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Her son had been gone for so long, and there's not actually much about her husband Will in the book, and that's intentional. In my mind, they sort of had a relationship where they were more coexisting than perhaps actually connected. Even before he got sick, Tova was his caretaker. And I don't know that they had a lot of connection, in those later years, but I think they stayed married because they were stuck.
Yeah, that's funny. I kind of got that myself reading that. And so then even when she talks about a potential relationship, going forward, she's like, well, we've been married for 40, I forget, 6 years or something. It's like, so, and then you just know it's gonna, well, you find out at the end. So conditioned to not spoil the end, but
yeah,
Turning a new page.
It was interesting to, a lot of my critique partners write romance and romantic comedy. So I had a lot of fun with them, doing the beta reads and the back and forth on the Tova and Ethan thread. Because it's a kind of a between a friendship and a romance, right? Like it's not actually a romance, but it's a companionship that may have some potential.
yeah.
But in the end, I thought it was so nice that he was just there with her, not trying to take anything too fast or rush anything, but he was just there.
Yeah.
I also was just thinking, when you were saying that she was needing to be a caretaker, and when Ethan got so excited that she asked him to go with her, he's like, she needs me, that's a good way to think about it. Oh, I really like companionship. That's a good word.
Yeah.
Very sweet. Yeah.
Well, I think Ethan is probably pretty lonely too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a very active social life with his poker games and his, I think it's so fascinating, the idea of someone who buys a grocery store and then takes the job of working the cash register just because they like to talk that darn much. And, love the experience of everyone in town has to come through me, every week to buy their eggs and milk. And he, can just keep his pulse on all of the gossip that way, but I think fundamentally that is true. To be needed for something, I think for him was it was exciting. It was nice.
Yeah. So Amy, I think you've got one more question, and we're gonna.
Well, a lot of people are asking. They all want to know what you're reading right now.
I just finished Anne Patchett's essay book, which I need to remind myself what it's called. These Precious Days. Yes, it was great. My reading has been a little bit more fragmented. And so I sometimes will pick up like short story books or essay books when I'm just, it's just bite-sized pieces. It's really nice. I just bought, and I'm about to dive into Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson, which I have heard is absolutely incredible, and I'm really excited for it.
Yeah. I love that the collection by Ann Patchett. It's just wonderful. And
Yeah.
I heard nothing but wonderful things about Black Cake.
Yeah.
I wanted to read this. It's not a question, it's a comment from Janet Lockhart. And I think it pretty much sums up the feeling that you get when you read this book. Well, it's one of the feelings that you get. She says both narrators do a wonderful job, but there is something special about Marcellus. I know he's an octopus, but the narrator is so wry and sardonic and sly that I find myself imagining Marcellus lounging in a smoking or I find myself imagining Marcellus lounging in a smoking jacket with 8 sleeves while sipping on a glass of whiskey as he marvels at the silly behavior of humans.
If there is an octopus afterlife, that is what he is doing. I have no doubt.
Oh, that's so great. Well, yeah, it's such a perfect image because it's kind of true. I mean, it's a funny conceit, but it's also it fits. Ravella Leaf says, let's see. Oh no, it's Nicole Terry Williams again, and she says, "Thank you for coming to talk to us. This book is a treasure, and I cannot wait for the world to experience this book." We couldn't agree more. It's really so wonderful. This has been so much fun. It's 3 o'clock. Boy, this hour flew, and such great questions and great engagement, which is exactly what we wanted. We wanted people to experience this book and then to come to talk to you about it and learn more about, why you wrote it. And your publishing story is so unique in a way. I mean, we've talked about this before. It's sort of like, you didn't go the traditional way of publishing. Do you want to talk about that for like a minute before we say goodbye? Because I love your publishing story.
Sure. Which part specifically?
Well, it's just that, I mean, you're not part of the Iowa writers group. It's like you just said,
Oh, no.
I'm going to do this. And then the pandemic comes and you said, okay, this is it. I'm doing it. And I just sort of love that.
Yeah, I don't have an MFA or any formal writing training. I have a really, really wonderful group of critique partners, who are all sort of in a similar position to me. We were just, people that met originally in writing classes, this extension, what is it called? Continuing education writing class that anyone can sign up for. And so I would say definitely, take the class. Like you never know. It definitely changed my life, and the relationships that I have made subsequently. And the other thing that I think has helped me grow a lot as a writer in the absence of formal writing training was just experimenting a lot. Like I do a lot of short story contests, where you're assigned to write in certain genres which you might not know as well, or given really bizarre prompts where you're like, how am I going to make a story out of that? And then you somehow make a story out of that. And I have met a lot of really, really talented people through those competitions as well that have helped me along the way. And I think I have to give them a shout out. There's a subset of those people that were like made this little querying group that were like, okay, we're going to query our novels this year. I didn't know how to write a query letter or do any of that. And so they, we all kind of walked that road together, and it was really, I don't know that I would have even known how to do it without having some other people figuring it out with me.
Right. I love that. I mean, you have a supportive group, and you obviously some friends of yours are here right now. You championing each other and supporting each other. And I think that's wonderful. And I was just talking to a neighbor of mine who just decided, but not just decided, but has decided to switch gears and go to nursing school. And I said, how's it going? She said, well, it was rough going in the beginning, but I'm getting the hang of it. And I told her about our conversation. I said, my author said, take the class. And I just think you are a shining example of, being a really, really gifted, talented writer who knows how to connect and also to stay with it and to push it. And we're so glad that you did during a pandemic with children. I don't know how you did all that, but Thank
A
you
lot
for
of
doing it.
Netflix. A lot of Netflix and a lot of snacks for everyone involved.
Yes,
And
that
a
was
lot
a
of
great,
coffee.
and a lot.
I'm
Well-
giving my grandmother a run for her money with my coffee intake the last couple of years. You know, you say I did a lot of writing after my kids went to bed during 2020 because they were, you know, I was doing remote schooling all day and or figuring out what the heck. I don't even know what we did all day every day. But I did a lot of writing after they went to bed and then would just wake up at whatever time the next morning. It's like just I'm only awake enough to push the button on this coffee maker and nothing else.
Wow. Wow. That's admirable, honestly. And your grandmother would be so proud. It's really something.
She was
So,
also kind of a night owl, so you know.
oh, wow. Wow. That's very interesting. So, yeah. Well, listen, the hour flew and we thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And folks, if you haven't read the book, you can, you can download it, read it, listen to it. And yes, our first Galley Book Club has been so much fun. Yes, I agree. This was terrific. And we're so glad that you all joined and brought your questions and your comments. And one quick thing before we say goodbye, Essie, because I'm not going to forget this time, next week. Don't go away, Shelby. So next week, we're going to be talking with Jess Walter, who has a collection of short stories coming out, The Angel of Rome. He is wonderful and beautiful ruins. Oh, I love this man. He is such a great writer. So please come next Tuesday and look at that jacket and talk to Jess Walter about his new collection of stories coming out in the spring. So that's next Tuesday. And back to Shelby Van Pelt, Remarkably Bright Creatures. Lainey, Essie, is there anything we want to say?
The only thing I'll say is our March pick will be announced the first Tuesday of March. So after, not next week, Jess Walter, but the next week, come back and you'll hear some books we're buzzing and our March pick. People are asking, so come back and you'll hear all about it.
You'll hear all about it, and then you'll hear about a lot of other books. We mention the book, we reveal it, we show you how to read it, and then we get on with the buzz so that we fill your brains with lots of books. So, Shelby, thank you again. Remarkably Bright Creatures goes on sale in May, and we congratulate you. And folks, thanks so much for joining in today. This was terrific.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun, and I'm so grateful to all the library folks. They are really like the best folks around, and thank you for all of your enthusiasm. This is really wonderful.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you next Tuesday, and take good care, and peace out. Bye.
Bye, everyone.